told y'all that Carol being a butthead would save the world. But y'all were too busy defending her actions to see the vision. This week's episode of Pluribus was released a bit early for the holidays, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that it's perfect. Spoilers if you aren't up to date. This is just one of those episodes where everything comes together. First, I need to take a moment to acknowledge the writers, pause to read, and the director for this episode, because they all deserve some Donald for this masterpiece that they put out today. So does Rhea Seahorn. Now 90% of this episode is her alone. I was at the edge of my seat for every moment of it. As I mentioned in my episode 4 review, Carol loves to talk a big game. She likes to feign like she loves to be alone and isolated. But in reality, I don't think she does. I think she needs someone else around her. And before that someone was Helen, and now it was the hive. Because if you think about it, Carol actually hasn't been alone this entire week. He was consistently interacting with the hive, talking to them, having conversations with them, and even arguing with them. It doesn't matter. She was having an emotional connection with this hive. And the gag is, as much as Carol, I think, didn't want to be alone, she needed that isolation, not just to get the answers, but to really take time to reflect on herself. Because I don't think that Carol actually truly got to process the death of Helen. Even in the previous episode, when she's rewatching her grieving with the truth serum, we see her fast forward with it. And truly, it took her taking truth serum for her to even feel those emotions. So now that she's totally alone, she is forced to confront those feelings, going into her bed for the first time and actually having to do things for herself. Which, it's funny to hear the audience and Carol try to dehumanize the hive so much when she calls them to do the most menial task. She was calling them every 10 minutes like a toxic ex, which was funny to me because they worded that isolation like a breakup. But I definitely think that this episode highlighted to her how much she needs people around. As someone who's lived alone for years, I can tell you it is so scary to be alone by yourself when noises happen. And so this scene where she makes them turn on the entire power grid because there are, I think, wolves. I don't know if they were wolves or coyotes outside. Please don't judge me. I'm from New York City and I don't know shit about either animal. But yeah, her asking them to do this was one of the most relatable things I've seen her do all season. That and her actually preparing a grave for Helen. Oh my God, I almost broke down watching her do it. I found the opening sequence so interesting, not just because the hive broke up with her, which was hilarious, but also the implications that they could feel anything beyond happiness and joy. And while I do think that the hive distanced themselves because she's getting so close to the truth, I also think that what Carol did to Zosha was the final straw and they felt violated. Both Carol and the audience are so quick to dehumanize the hive that I think that we forget that they are still humans with feelings, just afflicted with something that we don't quite understand and therefore reject. I think the story can be gearing up to both Carol and the hive being right. Both things can be true, you know? That being said, what do you think that Carol found in that warehouse? I'm sure it was something around human remains from all the context clues we got previously, which another question I had for people who know things about nature. Do wolves eat human remains? Like, I know that crows do, but I wasn't quite sure about the wolves, because if they don't, is this show suggesting that the hive is also affecting the animals? This mystery is just getting so juicy. Something tells me that it's not quite what we think. I don't know. I'm so very interested to see, because Carol isn't immediately horrified when she lifts that tarp. There's a moment where she's trying to figure out what exactly she's looking at, which is a testament for Rhea's incredible subtle acting all episode. I will say, if they are eating bodies, Carol was right to make sure that they didn't take Helen's remains. Finally, I have to give a shout out to this scene, which made me belly laugh. It's perfectly encapsulated, you know, the personality of the hive, but it also served as a way to show that Carol's caringness can be an asset in this extreme situation. Carol does not like to be inconvenienced, even if it means weighing her trash so someone else can take it out. And that's what led to this, which ultimately led to her finding the milk cartons. And that's why her being a Karen, her being a butthead is so freaking important, because most people are too polite to make half of the discoveries that she's had. Before this episode, I felt like Carol was not curious enough. And I think a piece of that is because she was comfortable. Not just from the questions that she would ask the hive. I don't know, I just wanted her to investigate more. Everyone everyone always talks about, oh, well, what would you do in this situation? If I really wanted to change it, I would be finding out everything I could. I'd be talking to them every day. And me grieving the person that I love would put me on this path of vengeance that would know no bounds. But everyone does process grief differently, and I can say the tragedy of Carol has been so compelling, and I never felt worse about her than I did in this episode. And we can already see from her trying to reach out to the other survivors, this tragedy and this event is changing her for the better. Because I think ultimately what the show is trying to say is obviously individuality is important, but there's strength in community. And I think that Carol's learning both. Got chills when she said, I respect your opinion, but enjoy that because that will be the last one that you have. Yeah, please tell me what your thoughts were on this episode. It was so incredible. It took me all morning to figure out like what I wanted to say because I just couldn't get over it. Once again, I need to highlight some of the shots from this episode. This is the reason why I love Vince Gilligan's work, because Albuquerque is always a character in it. And the color palette that he and the directors he worked with chooses is it just blows my mind. At the sun setting, when Carol finally realizes that chapter of her life is over, what are we doing here? 5 out of 5, Frankie Flames. Yeah, tell me what your thoughts were on this episode and what do you think that Carol found? Let me know in my comments below.